The wind howled across the Montana plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bite of early winter and the promise of a storm that would last for days. Samuel Hart pulled his worn coat tighter around his shoulders as he stepped out onto the porch of his ranch house, the wooden boards creaking under his weight. The sound was familiar, comforting in its own way, though comfort had become a foreign concept to him these past 3 years. 3 years since the accident. 3 years since his world had collapsed in a tangle of metal and glass on a rain-slicked highway. 3 years since he'd lost everything that mattered. The cattle were restless tonight, sensing the approaching storm. Sam could hear them lowing in the distance, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the ache in his chest. He'd grown accustomed to that ache, had learned to carry it like an old injury. That flared up with changes in the weather. Tonight, it felt particularly sharp. He was about to head back inside when he saw her. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The figure stumbling through his front gate looked like a ghost, pale and wavering in the dim light from his porch. But as she drew closer, he could see she was real enough, a young woman, maybe 25, with long dark hair matted with blood and dirt. Her clothes were torn, and she moved with the careful, pained gait of someone badly hurt. Sam's first instinct was to go back inside and pretend he hadn't seen her. He'd become skilled at avoiding complications, at keeping the world at arm's length. But something about the way she held herself, the determined set of her shoulders despite her obvious pain, reminded him of someone he'd once known, someone he'd lost. "Help me," she called out, her voice barely carrying over the wind. "Please." Against his better judgment, Sam found himself stepping off the porch and walking toward her. As he got closer, he could see the extent of her injuries. A deep gash ran along her left temple, and her right arm hung at an odd angle. Her clothes were soaked through, and she was shivering violently. "What happened to you?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Car accident," she managed between chattering teeth. "About 2 miles back. My phone, it's dead. I've been walking for hours." Sam looked past her into the darkness, as if he could see the wreckage she'd left behind. The storm was getting worse, and the temperature was dropping fast. Even if he wanted to turn her away, and part of him did, he couldn't send her back out into this weather. "Come on," he said gruffly, taking her good arm to steady her. "Let's get you inside." The woman she told him her name was Elena nearly collapsed. As soon as they reached the warmth of the house, Sam helped her to the couch in his living room, noting how she tried to hide her pain, how she apologized for bleeding on his furniture. It had been a long time since he'd had anyone in his house, and he felt awkward, uncertain of what to do. "I need to look at that arm," he said, disappearing into the bathroom to gather supplies. When he returned with his first aid kit, she was studying the framed photographs on his mantel, pictures of him with a woman and a little girl, all smiles and sunshine, taken in what felt like another lifetime. "Your family?" Elena asked softly. Sam's jaw tightened. "Was." He set the kit down harder than necessary. "They died 3 years ago." He expected her to offer condolences, to give him one of those pitying looks he'd grown to hate. Instead, she simply nodded and held out her injured arm. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly, "and I'm sorry for intruding. I'll leave as soon as the storm passes." Her matter-of-fact acceptance of his grief caught him off guard. Most people either avoided the subject entirely or overwhelmed him with sympathy he didn't want. Elena did neither. She simply acknowledged his pain and moved on, as if she understood that some wounds were too deep for words. Setting her arm took longer than expected. The bone wasn't broken, but it was badly sprained, and she'd lost a fair amount of blood from the cut on her head. As he worked, cleaning and bandaging her wounds, he found himself stealing glances at her face. She had kind eyes, dark brown and patient, and she didn't flinch even when he knew his ministrations must hurt. "You're good at this," she said as he wrapped her arm in a makeshift sling. "My wife was a nurse." He replied without thinking, then immediately regretted the admission. He didn't talk about Sarah anymore, hadn't in years, but something about Elena's presence made the words slip out. "She taught you well." Sam finished the bandage and stepped back, suddenly aware of how close he'd been standing. "You should get some rest." The couch pulls out into a bed. I'll be in my room if you need anything, But Elena was looking at the photographs again, her expression thoughtful. How old was your daughter? The question hit him like a physical blow. 7, he managed. Her name was Katie. She looks like she was full of life. Sam's throat tightened. Katie had been full of life, always laughing, always moving, always asking questions he couldn't answer. She'd loved the ranch, loved the animals, loved riding on his shoulders as he did his morning chores. The silence in the house since her death had been deafening. She was, he said simply. Elena nodded again, that same quiet acceptance. The hardest part isn't missing them, she said softly. It's missing who you were when they were alive. The words hit so close to home that Sam felt his breath catch. He stared at this stranger who seemed to understand what others couldn't, what he'd never been able to articulate himself. Yes, he missed Sarah and Katie desperately, but what haunted him most was the loss of the man he'd been when they were alive. That man had laughed easily, had found joy in simple things, had believed in the future. That man had died with them. On the highway. You should rest, he said again, more gently this time. I'll check on you in a few hours. But sleep didn't come easily that night. Sam lay in his bed listening to the storm rage outside and thinking about the woman in his living room. There was something about her that unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a way that made him feel exposed, vulnerable. He'd worked so hard to build walls around his grief, to create a routine that kept the pain at bay. Elena's presence threatened to crack those walls. When he finally dozed off near dawn, he dreamed of Sarah and Katie for the first time in months. In the dream, they were sitting at the kitchen table, sharing breakfast and planning their day. Katie was chattering about a bird she'd seen outside her window, and Sarah was laughing at something Sam had said. It was so vivid, so real, that when he woke up, he expected to hear their voices in the kitchen. Instead, he heard something else, the sound of someone moving around downstairs, the quiet clatter of dishes and silverware. For a moment, his heart raced with irrational hope. Then reality crashed back in, and he remembered his unexpected guest. Sam dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, unsure of what he'd find. Elena was in the kitchen, moving carefully around the space with her injured arm in its sling. She'd found eggs and bacon in his refrigerator and was attempting to cook breakfast one-handed. You don't have to do that, he said from the doorway. She turned, offering him a small smile. I wanted to. You saved my life last night. The least I can do is make you breakfast. The smell of bacon filled the kitchen, and Sam realized he was hungry for the first time in days. He'd been living on coffee and whatever he could grab quickly. Eating had become a chore rather than a pleasure, but watching Elena work, seeing someone else in his kitchen again, stirred something in him he'd thought was dead. How's the arm? He asked, moving to help her flip the bacon. Sore, but better. You did a good job with the bandages. She paused, studying his face. Did you sleep at all? Some. He didn't mention the dreams, the way waking up had felt like losing them all over again. They ate in companionable silence, the storm still raging outside. Elena had managed to make coffee as well, and Sam found himself savoring the taste in a way he hadn't in years. There was something about having someone to share a meal with that made everything taste better. The storm's supposed to last another day or two, he said eventually. You're welcome to stay until it passes. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. Sam looked at her across the table. This woman who'd stumbled into his life in the middle of a storm. She was still pale from blood loss, still clearly in pain, but there was a strength about her that reminded him of Sarah. Not in looks. Elena was darker, more angular where Sarah had been soft, but in spirit. I'm sure, he said. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of peace. Elena proved to be easy company, content to sit quietly while Sam went about his chores, but engaging when conversation rose naturally. She helped where she could with her good arm, insisting on contributing. Despite her injuries, they talked about safe things: the ranch, the weather, the animals, carefully avoiding the deeper currents that ran beneath their interaction. But on the second evening, as they sat by the fire Sam had built to ward off the cold, Elena broke the unspoken rule. Tell me about them, she said quietly. Your wife and daughter. Sam's first instinct was to deflect, to change the subject as he always did. But something in Elena's voice, in the way she looked at him, made him reconsider. Maybe it was the fact that she was leaving soon, that this was safe somehow because it was temporary.